Kerry Washington sat down for what she thought would be a standard interview with Ibrahim Traoré. But as Traoré shared his heartfelt story and vision, the moment took an emotional turn. Carr's reaction, wiping tears on live TV, left viewers deeply moved and sparked an outpouring of admiration online. Watch the powerful exchange everyone is talking about. It was Monday afternoon in Los Angeles. The studio lights glimmered. The cameras were rolling and Kerry Washington sat poised in her chair. Today's segment was supposed to be simple, a conversation with Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, about leadership in Africa's future. Kerry smiled for the cameras, flipping through her notes as the host announced him. But when Ibrahim walked in, there was something about his quiet presence that immediately hushed the audience. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just a modest jacket and the warm smile of someone who had nothing to prove. Kerry greeted him warmly, but her usual confidence wavered when he sat down across from her. His calm eyes seemed to look straight into hers and straight through. They exchanged pleasantries at first. Then Kerry lightly asked, "So, President Trump, how does it feel leading a country so many have written off?" He didn't laugh, he didn't flinch. He simply looked at her and said softly, "It feels like carrying the weight of children who will never see tomorrow if I fail." The audience grew quiet. Kerry's smile faded, and something in her chest tightened. Kerry leaned in, sensing there was more behind his words. "What do you mean by that?" she asked gently. Ibrahim's expression stayed calm, but his eyes glistened. He looked toward the cameras as he spoke, not for himself, but for someone watching. "Last week," he began, "I buried a boy named Umar. He was only 11. He died carrying water to his family on a path too dangerous for any child to walk. His mother stood in the dust and asked me why her son had to die like that. I had no answer, so I swore I'd change it, even if it cost me everything." Carr's throat tightened. Her fingers gripped her note cards. "I don't lead for power," he continued. "I lead because every child in my country deserves more than dust, fear, and silence." For the first time that day, the audience fell completely silent. No phones, no murmurs, just the sound of his steady voice filling the room. Kerry blinked rapidly, willing herself not to cry yet, but his next words broke her. "And I fear," he added softly, "I'm already too late for so many." Kerry swallowed hard, her voice catching. "Too late," she repeated faintly. Ibrahim nodded, lowering his gaze. "Every morning I wake up to another report. A school burned, a village gone. A child's name added to the list of lives we failed to protect." He looked up then, meeting her eyes. "Again, tell me, Miss Washington, how do you sleep when you know your people are dying?" Kerry's lips parted, but no words came. She could feel the tears rising now, hot and unstoppable. And right there on live television, she reached for a tissue and dabbed her eyes, whispering, "I don't know." The audience shifted uncomfortably, many wiping their own eyes. The cameraman zoomed in as a single tear rolled down Ibrahim's cheek, the first he'd shown. Kerry looked at him and whispered, "I'm sorry." He gave a faint, weary smile. "Don't be sorry," he said gently. "Just help me tell their stories." The cameras kept rolling, capturing a moment no one could have scripted, a quiet breaking of hearts across the world. As the cameras zoomed in, Ibrahim reached into his jacket and placed a worn photograph on the table between them. Kerry glanced at it and froze. It showed a young boy barefoot, holding a torn notebook to his chest. His big, hopeful eyes stared into the lens as though begging someone, anyone, to see him. Ibrahim's voice was low but clear. "This is Adma," he said. He wanted to be a doctor. He walked 6 kilometers to school every morning. 2 weeks ago, his school was attacked. Adma didn't make it home that day. Carr's lips parted slightly as she stared at the boy's face. The audience sat silent, their breathing almost audible. "He was only 12, Ibrahim added. "But to me, he was my son. All of them are my children." Kerry pressed her fingers to her lips. She felt the heat behind her eyes again, but she couldn't look away. "Every decision I make," Ibrahim continued, "is for children like Adama, because if I fail, they don't just lose hope, they lose their lives." For a moment, no one in the room even dared to blink. Kerry swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she finally asked, "How do you carry all that pain?" Ibrahim turned his gaze from the photograph to her. His answer came after a long, quiet pause. "I don't carry it alone," he said softly. "I let the children carry me every time I feel like giving up. I remember their faces, their laughter. Even when they have nothing, they find joy. If they can keep going, so can I." A single tear slipped down Kerry's cheek as she nodded, unable to speak. Behind the cameras, even the crew looked shaken. One cameraman discreetly wiped his eyes. Ibrahim leaned back slightly, his voice almost a whisper now. "But it's hard," he confessed. "Hard to smile at grieving mothers. Hard to look at another grave and promise things will change. But we must keep going because they deserve better." The audience burst into quiet applause, their own tears glistening. And still, Kerry couldn't take her eyes off that photograph. The interview was supposed to wrap after 15 minutes, but nobody moved. Not Kerry, not the crew, not even the producer. Nervously signaling from offstage, Kerry leaned in, voice shaky but resolute. "If Adama could hear you right now, what would you say?" Ibrahim's expression softened. He glanced down at the photograph, then back into the camera, as though speaking directly to the boy's spirit. "I would say, I'm sorry we failed you, but I promise your name will not be forgotten. Your dream will not die with you. I swear to you, Adama, we will keep fighting. For every child still waiting, for every dream still alive." The audience stood and began to clap, some sobbing openly. Kerry dabbed her eyes, unable to hide her own tears. The moment felt sacred, raw, and real. Ibrahim bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the emotion in the room, and for the first time, Kerry reached across the table and held his hand. The cameras kept rolling, capturing a moment that would soon inspire millions around the world. After the show cut to a commercial break, the studio remained heavy with silence. Kerry still held Ibrahim's hand as he quietly slipped her a folded piece of paper. "This was written by Adama's mother," he explained softly. Kerry unfolded it. Her fingers trembling, the simple, shaky handwriting read, "Thank you for seeing my son. Even in death, you give him life. May you never stop fighting for our children." Tears slipped freely down Carr's cheeks as she read it aloud. The audience gasped, and a cameraman captured her wiping her eyes yet again. When they returned live, Carr's voice cracked as she said, "Mr. Traoré, I think everyone at home wants to know. How can we help?" For the first time, Ibrahim smiled. It wasn't a politician's smile, but something small and deeply human. "You already have," he replied, "by listening, by remembering their names. But if you can, please help us build what they need: clean water, safe schools, hope." Kerry's eyes glistened as she nodded, unable to speak. The cameras panned to the audience, where even grown men sat with tears streaming down their faces. After the show wrapped, the audience filed out slowly, but many stayed behind, waiting for a chance to speak to Ibrahim. One young woman, clutching her daughter's hand, approached him first. "Mr. Traoré," she said through sobs, "I never thought of Burkina Faso before tonight. I didn't even know where it was, but now I will never forget. I promise you that." Ibrahim bent slightly to meet the little girl's eyes. He smiled softly at her and handed her the photo of Adama. "Take care of him for me," he said gently. The girl nodded solemnly, holding the photo like a treasure. When Kerry stepped off the stage, she was stunned to see her entire crew lined up, waiting their turn to shake Ibrahim's hand. Some even embraced him silently, unable to find words. By the time he left the studio, Adama and Cornby's Stand With Ibrahim were trending worldwide. Millions of people posted their own promises. "We see you now, we'll never forget." And Ibrahim, he simply got into his car and asked his aide quietly, "How many children can we help with what we've raised so far?" That night, alone in his hotel room, Ibrahim sat by the window overlooking the city lights. He turned his phone over and over. In his hands, reading the flood of messages pouring in, one stood out from a young boy in Chicago. "Dear President Traoré, my name is Jamal. I'm 11. I want to be a doctor just like Adama. Please don't stop fighting. You give me hope, too." Ibrahim smiled faintly, though his eyes brimmed with tears. He looked over at his briefcase. Inside were more letters, more names, more children he carried in his heart. At that moment, he whispered into the quiet room, "Adama, they remember you now. The whole world does." He closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely. Outside, the streets of Los Angeles bustled with life. But in one quiet corner, a president sat alone, carrying the weight of a nation in the hope of millions more. And tomorrow, he promised himself he would keep fighting. The next morning, Ibrahim awoke to his phone ringing. It was Kerry. Her voice was still heavy with emotion. "Mr. Traoré, I can't stop thinking about last night," she admitted. "Neither can anyone else. The network wants you back for another segment tonight. Prime time." Ibrahim hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will it help the children?" "Yes," she said firmly. "We've already raised over $500,000 overnight. People are demanding to know more. They want to help." He closed his eyes and nodded to himself. "Then I'll come." That evening, the car pulled up to the studio again. This time, the crowd waiting outside was bigger, holding candles, posters with a face, and banners that read, "We see you. Hope for Burkina Faso." As Ibrahim stepped out, the crowd parted and began applauding. Some wept openly just to see him. He walked quietly through them, stopping every few feet to hug someone or shake a hand. And inside, Kerry was already waiting, her own eyes glistening as she watched him through the glass. As the cameras rolled, Kerry leaned forward. "Mr. Traoré, last night you said you carry these children as though they were your own. Can I ask, do you have children yourself?" The question caught him off guard for the first time. His jaw tightened, his voice dropped low. "No," he said softly. "I have no children, but I lost one." The room went still. Kerry blinked, her hand instinctively, reaching toward his. "Her name was Awa," he continued, his breath catching. "My sister's daughter. She died of cholera at 6 years old. There was no doctor, no clean water. I was already a soldier then, and I swore no child in my country should ever die like her again." His hands trembled as he placed a second photograph on the table. This one of a little girl in a faded pink dress, smiling shilly. Kerry covered her mouth with her hand. The audience gasped. Some cried, and Ibrahim, his voice breaking just slightly, said, "Every child I fight for is Awa to me." When the show ended, no one moved. The lights stayed on. The cameras kept rolling. Kerry stood up first, reaching for his hand. Then the audience followed, standing, clapping, many in tears. The applause didn't stop. For nearly 2 full minutes they stood, not just for the man, but for every story, every name, every silent child he carried with him. Ibrahim's shoulders shook slightly as he bowed his head in thanks. Kerry turned to the cameras and spoke directly. To the world, if you are watching this and you still feel nothing, look again. Look into his eyes. Look at AWA, look at Adama, and ask yourself, what would you do if it were your child? Donations skyrocketed that hour. Social media exploded with clips of the moment. People from every corner of the globe shared their own stories of loss, hope, and action, all inspired by one man. And as Ibrahim left the studio that night, he whispered quietly to himself, "We are not invisible anymore." The next morning, Ibrahim was preparing to leave Los Angeles when Kerry called again. "Don't leave yet," she pleaded. "I want you to meet someone." An hour later, she arrived at his hotel with a little boy named Caleb. He was 7 years old, recovering from cancer, and had seen the interview the night before. Caleb's mother explained through tears. He said he wanted to meet the man who fights for children no one else sees. Ibrahim knelt in front of Caleb and smiled warmly. "You are stronger than any soldier I've ever known," he said. Caleb hugged him without a word, clutching his jacket like he'd known him forever. Kerry watched with tears streaming down her cheeks. As they said goodbye, Caleb whispered, "Don't stop." Those 2 words stayed with Ibrahim as he boarded his plane that afternoon. He stared out the window as Los Angeles disappeared beneath him, already planning his next move. Back home, there were still so many children waiting, and now the world was watching. When Ibrahim landed in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, the sun was already setting. The dusty air and familiar voices greeted him as his car drove through the quiet streets. Waiting at his office were stacks of papers, urgent reports, but also hundreds of letters from around the world. He opened a few at random. "You've opened my eyes. My family just donated to rebuild a school. You gave my daughter hope again." For the first time in months, Ibrahim allowed himself to sit back and smile. But the next report his aide handed him erased the smile. "Mr. President, The aide said softly. Another attack, a school for children dead. Ibrahim closed his eyes and pressed his fingers to his forehead. Even with all the world's attention, the violence hadn't stopped. He rose from his chair and said quietly, "Prepare the convoy. We leave at dawn." There was still work to do and no time to rest. The next morning, Ibrahim stood in a quiet, broken village. The roof of the school was blackened from fire. Mothers wept in doorways. The names of the children lost were being written on a makeshift board. Ibrahim walked slowly, greeting each family. Some cried into his shoulder. Others just stared, silent and hollow. At one point, he knelt beside a little boy, sitting in the dust. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Isa," the boy replied, barely above a whisper. "What do you want to be, Isa?" "A teacher," Isa murmured. "So nobody forgets us." Ibrahim nodded, swallowing hard. He placed his hand gently on the boy's head and whispered, "Then I'll make sure they never forget you. That's my promise." A photographer standing nearby captured the moment, and that image would soon circle the globe, igniting even more hearts to his cause. But as he stood there, surrounded by ashes and grief, Ibrahim's own heart felt heavier than ever. And yet he stood tall, because he knew the world was watching now. That evening, after his visit to the burned school, Ibrahim returned to Ouagadougou, exhausted. He barely stepped out of his car when his aide ran to him, breathless. "Mr. President, you have to see this." The aide handed him a tablet showing a live stream in New York, London, Nairobi, Tokyo. Hundreds of thousands of people stood in public squares holding candles. Screens projected Adama's photos. Signs bore the names of Awa Isa and so many others. And a chant rose, "We see you, we see you, we see you." Ibrahim set the tablet down and stepped out into the courtyard of his office. To his surprise, the same sight met him there. Thousands of Burkina Faso citizens stood outside, candles in hand, whispering the names of the children he fought for. Tears welled up in his eyes as he stood silently, overwhelmed. In that quiet night, Ibrahim finally allowed himself to believe. The world was no longer looking away. The next morning, Ibrahim's phone rang. It was Kerry again, her voice warm and emotional. "Ibrahim, you've changed the world in just 5 days," she said. "I don't know how you do it." "I didn't," he replied gently. "They did. The world just needed a reminder of what love can look like." Kerry went silent before saying softly, "I want to come to Burkina Faso to see it with my own eyes, to meet the children you fight for. Will you allow me?" "Of course," Ibrahim said, smiling faintly. "Come see what hope looks like in the dust." Later that day, Ibrahim stood at his window, watching a group of children playing soccer in the street outside his office. Their laughter carried on the wind. He closed his eyes and whispered, "We're not finished yet." On the 7th day since that first interview, Ibrahim and Kerry stood together in the courtyard of a rebuilt school. The children cheered, waving little flags. Mothers wept as desks were carried in books, stacked walls painted. Kerry wiped her tears again as cameras rolled. "What will you do now, Mr. President?" she asked quietly. He crouched to speak to a little girl holding a tattered notebook. "We keep building," he said softly. "One child at a time, one school at a time, until there's nothing left to rebuild, only dreams left to chase." The girl smiled at him, and Ibrahim straightened, facing the cameras. "We are not poor because we have nothing," he said firmly. "We are rich because we have each other, and we will rise together." The world watched live as applause and tears filled the air. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't just watch. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What part moved you most? Whose name will you remember tonight? Drop it below. Let's keep their stories alive together. Hit subscribe, like, and comment now. And thank you for seeing.